The dust settled around Jake Morrison's boots as he dismounted near the creek, his horse nickering softly in the fading Arizona twilight. He'd been riding for 3 days straight, running from a past that clung to him like the red desert sand, a past of saloons, card games, and women who saw only the leather holster on his hip and the silver coins in his pocket. At 32, he was tired. Tired of drifting, tired of emptiness dressed up as freedom, tired of waking up alone despite never lacking company. That's when he saw her. She knelt by the water's edge, her long black hair catching the last rays of sunlight like strands of silk. Her Apache dress, though worn and faded, moved with a dignity that made his chest tighten. She was filling clay pots with water, her movements deliberate and graceful, and for a moment Jake forgot to breathe. But it wasn't her beauty that stopped him, it was the profound loneliness in her posture, the way she seemed to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders. "Ma'am," he called out, removing his hat. "Didn't mean to startle you. Just passing through, looking for a place to water my horse." She looked up, and her eyes, dark as midnight and twice as deep, met his with a wariness that spoke of hard-earned lessons. She couldn't have been more than 25, but those eyes had seen lifetimes. She stood slowly, assessing him with the careful attention of someone who'd learned to read danger in the smallest gestures. "The creek is free to all," she said, her English accented but clear. "Your horse may drink." Jake led his mare forward, acutely aware of the woman's gaze tracking his every movement. He'd been watched by women before, hungrily, calculatingly, flirtatiously, but never like this. She watched him the way a deer watches a wolf, ready to flee at the first sign of threat. "Name's Jake Morrison," he offered, letting his horse drink deeply. "I appreciate your kindness." "I am Ayana," she replied, then after a pause, "It means eternal blossom, though there is little that blooms eternal in this desert." The bitterness in her voice cut him. "Your people's village nearby?" Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "There is no village anymore. The soldiers came 2 winters past. Those who survived scattered like leaves in wind. My husband." She stopped, swallowing hard. "He did not survive." Jake's stomach dropped. He'd heard stories, terrible stories, of what the cavalry did to Apache settlements. He'd even ridden with some of those men years ago, before he understood what he was part of. The shame of it had been one of the many reasons he'd started drifting. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. Ayana studied him for a long moment, then seemed to come to some internal decision. "You look hungry." "I have stew." "Not much, but enough to share if you wish." Jake's throat constricted with unexpected emotion. When was the last time someone had offered him something without wanting something in return? "I'd be honored, ma'am. And I got some cornmeal and dried beef in my pack I can contribute." She nodded, a ghost of approval crossing her features. "Follow me." Her home was a small adobe structure tucked into a canyon wall, nearly invisible unless you knew where to look. Inside, it was sparse but clean, a bedroll in one corner, a small cooking area, some baskets she'd woven, and a shrine with items Jake recognized as Apache, a piece of turquoise, some feathers, a photograph so faded he could barely make out the man standing beside a younger version of Ayana. As she prepared the meal, Jake found himself watching her with a feeling he couldn't name. She moved with such purpose, such quiet strength. When their fingers accidentally touched as he handed her the cornmeal, she flinched as though burned, and he saw it, the fear beneath the strength, the wound beneath the warrior. They ate in comfortable silence as darkness fell completely and a small fire crackled between them. Jake told her about his horse, about the stars, about the mountains he'd seen up north, safe topics that didn't require him to excavate his own painful history. She listened, and occasionally, the corners of her mouth would quirk upward, not quite a smile but something close. Finally, as the fire burned low, she spoke. "Why are you really here, Jake Morrison? Men like you do not simply pass through. They are running towards something or away from it." Her directness startled him into honesty. "Away from it, I suppose." Away from being the kind of man who takes and never gives. Away from using people and being used. Away from. He paused, searching for words. Away from being hollow. Ayanna poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling upward. And what do you run toward? Don't rightly know yet. Something real, I suppose. Something that matters. She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't respond. When she did, her voice was barely above a whisper. There is work here, if you want it. The roof needs repair before winter comes. The fence for the small garden is broken. I can pay you with meals and a place to sleep in the lean-to outside. Nothing more. Jake's heart hammered. I'd be happy to help, ma'am. Don't need payment. Everyone needs something, Mr. Morrison. Her eyes locked onto his, intense and searching. I have learned this the hard way. Since my husband died, many men have come offering help. But their hands always reach for more than hammer and nails. Their eyes always want more than I wish to give. So I ask you now, directly, as is the Apache way, do you only want my body like the others? The question hit him like a fist to the gut. The raw vulnerability in her voice, the defensive set of her shoulders, the way she seemed to brace herself for his answer, it all spoke of violations, of trust broken, of men who had seen her as prey rather than person. Jake set down his cup carefully, meeting her gaze with all the sincerity he possessed. No, ma'am. I don't. Truth is, I've spent most of my adult life taking what I wanted from women who offered it freely, and it left me emptier every time. I'm tired of that man. I want to be better. I want to. He struggled for words. I want to give something instead of take. I want to help someone who needs it without expecting anything back. I want to matter to somebody in a way that's good and decent. Ayanna's eyes glistened in the firelight. Pretty words. Many men have pretty words. Then let my actions speak instead, Jake said quietly. Give me a week. Let me fix what's broken around here. If at any point I make you uncomfortable, I'll ride out immediately, no questions asked. You have my word as a man trying to find his honor. She searched his face for what felt like an eternity. Finally, she nodded once. 1 week. But know this, Jake Morrison, I sleep with a knife, and I know how to use it. My husband taught me to protect myself before the soldiers taught me why I needed to. Understood, Jake said. And for what it's worth, I'm glad you can protect yourself. A woman alone out here needs that skill. Something shifted in her expression, surprise, perhaps, that he approved of her strength rather than being threatened by it. She stood, wrapping her shawl tighter. The lean-to is behind the house. There are blankets there. We begin work at sunrise. That night, lying in the lean-to with his saddle for a pillow, Jake stared up at the stars visible through the gaps in the roof. He could hear Ayanna moving inside the house, settling in for sleep. For the first time in years, he felt something stir in his chest that wasn't restlessness or dissatisfaction. It felt almost like purpose. He didn't know it yet, but that conversation by the fire had set both their lives on a different path. Sometimes redemption comes not through grand gestures but through simple choices, the choice to see another person's humanity, the choice to give rather than take, the choice to build rather than destroy. As sleep finally claimed him, Jake's last conscious thought was a prayer to a God he wasn't sure was listening. Let me be worthy of her trust. Let me finally be the man I should have been all along. The days that followed established a rhythm that soothed something deep in Jake's soul. He woke with the sun, worked until his muscles ached, shared simple meals with Ayanna, and fell into exhausted sleep each night. But the work itself was only half the story. The real transformation happened in the spaces between, in the conversations that slowly, carefully, began to bloom between two wounded souls. Ayanna watched him those first few days with the vigilance of a hawk, her body language constantly ready for betrayal. Jake understood. He made sure to announce his presence before rounding corners, to keep proper distance, to ask permission before entering any space that might be considered hers. He treated her home, her belongings, and her person with a reverence that seemed to confuse her at first. On the third day, as he replaced broken roof tiles while she worked in her small garden below, she called up to him. "You have done this work before. You are skilled." Jake wiped sweat from his brow. "My father was a carpenter before he died. He taught me his trade. I just forgot it for a while. Forgot a lot of things, actually." "What made you forget?" She didn't look up from her work, but he could hear genuine curiosity in her voice. "Anger, mostly. My mother died when I was young. My father remarried a woman who saw me as a burden. When my father died, she sent me away at 15. I was angry at the world, angry at God, angry at myself. That anger made me hard, made me not care about people or consequences. I did things." He stopped, shame tightening his throat. "I rode with rough men. Hurt people who didn't deserve it. Used women who offered themselves because they thought I was exciting and dangerous. I became the man my father hoped I'd never be." Ayana was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't respond. When she did, her voice was soft. "My husband used to say that a man's past is like a river that runs behind him. He cannot change where it has flowed, but he can choose where it flows next. Are you choosing, Jake Morrison? Or are you simply running?" The question struck deep. Jake climbed down from the roof and sat on the edge of the garden, careful to maintain respectful distance. "I'm trying to choose. But I don't know if a man like me gets to have a fresh start. Don't know if I deserve one." She finally looked at him, really looked at him, and he saw a recognition there, the recognition of shared pain. "I understand this feeling. After the soldiers killed my husband, after what some of them did to me and others before we escaped, I felt destroyed. Not just sad. Destroyed. Like the person I was had died with him. I hated the white men. I hated their God. I hated this desert that had become my prison rather than my home." Jake's fists clenched involuntarily, fury burning through him at what she'd implied. But Ayana continued, her voice steady despite the tremor he could detect beneath. "But hatred is like a poison that burns the vessel that holds it. My grandmother, who survived and lived with me until last winter, told me this. She said I could let what happened make me hard and bitter, or I could let it teach me who I truly was beneath the pain. She said suffering reveals character, it does not create it." "Your grandmother was a wise woman," Jake said quietly. "Yes. And she would have liked you, I think. She always said the measure of a person is not their worst moment but what they choose to do after it." They worked in companionable silence after that, but something had shifted. The wall between them had developed a doorway. That evening, as they shared a meal of rabbit Jake had snared and vegetables from Ayana's garden, she told him about her husband, how they'd met as children, how he'd courted her with wildflowers and songs, how he'd died protecting their village. Her voice broke when she described finding him, and Jake reached out instinctively, then stopped, his hand hovering in the air between them. "May I?" he asked softly. She looked at his hand, then at his face, searching for ulterior motives. Finding none, she slowly nodded. Jake gently took her hand in his, not grasping, not pulling, just holding. Her fingers were calloused from work, strong and capable, and they trembled slightly in his palm. "I'm so sorry you lost him," Jake said. "I'm sorry for what was done to you and your people. I'm sorry I was ever part of the world that created that suffering. I can't fix it or undo it. But I can promise you this, not all of us are like those men. Some of us are trying to be better." Tears slipped down Ayana's cheeks, and she didn't wipe them away. "Why are you kind to me, Jake? What do you gain from this?" "Everything that matters," he replied. "A chance to be useful instead of destructive. A chance to give instead of take. A chance to be worthy of sitting across the fire from someone as strong and brave as you. That's not nothing, Ayanna. That's everything. She squeezed his hand, and they sat like that as the fire crackled between them, two broken people finding unexpected solace in simple human connection. The week Jake had promised stretched into 2, then 3. The work expanded. He not only fixed what was broken but improved what was barely functioning. He reinforced the garden fence, dug a deeper well, crafted new shutters for the windows, and built a proper door to replace the blanket that had hung in the doorway. Every nail he drove, every board he cut, felt like an act of penance and purpose combined. But more than the physical repairs, something else was being rebuilt. Ayanna began to smile, tentatively at first, then more freely. She taught him Apache words, laughed when he butchered the pronunciation, and shared stories of her people's traditions. He told her about the stars his mother had taught him to navigate by, about the books his father had read aloud, about the man he'd wanted to be before life had hardened him. They developed their own language of trust, small gestures that meant everything. She stopped flinching when he moved near her. He stopped second-guessing every word before he spoke. She began to sing while she worked, soft Apache songs that made his heart ache with their beauty. He brought her gifts from town, not flowers or perfume like the other men had tried, but practical things he knew she needed, seeds for the garden, a new pot to replace the cracked one, leather for mending. One evening, about a month after his arrival, they sat outside watching the sunset paint the canyon walls in shades of orange and gold. Ayanna turned to him suddenly, her eyes serious. "I need to tell you something," she said. "The other men who came, who offered help, I accepted at first because I needed the help. But always, they eventually showed their true purpose. One tried to force himself into my home at night. Another stole from me when I refused his advances. Another spread rumors in town that I was a woman of loose morals because I rejected him. I began to believe that all men were the same. That kindness was just another word for manipulation." Jake's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, letting her speak. "But you, Jake Morrison, you have been here a month, and not once have you asked for anything but the chance to be useful. You work harder than any man I have known. You treat me with respect I did not think I would ever receive again from someone outside my people. You have made me believe." Her voice caught. "You have made me believe that perhaps not all is lost. That perhaps there is still goodness in this world." "Ayanna," Jake said softly, "you gave me something precious when you let me stay. You gave me purpose. You gave me a chance to matter. You treated me like I could be something better than my past. That's a gift beyond measure." She reached out and took his hand, not waiting for him to offer, but choosing to reach for him. "I am no longer afraid when I look at you. Do you know how rare that is? How precious?" Jake's eyes burned with unshed tears. "I don't deserve that trust, but I'll spend every day trying to be worthy of it." The next day, trouble arrived in the form of Deputy Marshal Garrett and 2 men from town. Jake was working on the fence when he heard horses approaching. He recognized Garrett. They'd crossed paths in a saloon 2 months back, and Garrett was the kind of lawman who saw badges as licenses for cruelty. Well, Garrett drawled, dismounting. "Heard there was a white man shacked up with an Apache squaw. Didn't believe it till now." Jake's blood went cold at the slur, but he kept his voice level. "I'm helping a lady with repairs to her property. Nothing more." "Sure you are." Garrett grinned at his companions. "Everyone knows what kind of help these women give in exchange for a roof over their heads." The fury that rose in Jake was different from the anger of his youth.